Well, we're in the neighborhood today, and the topic of the day is workplace fires. When I first entered the workforce back in the day, a million years ago, before disco, the reality of the situation was half the employers in the country, half the employees in the country were working in manufacturing. And today it's something like 15% or something. I forget exactly what the numbers are, but it's roughly in that order of magnitude. And what the story on that was is that manufacturing operations are dangerous in and of themselves, and plus it was back in the day before OSHA and before a lot of other stuff, and so the result of that, the first place I worked out of college, there were a lot of fires. And I know it's kind of weird to think about, because in this era practically no one has ever worked on a place where there's been a workplace fire. There are a few people, not very many. And so the story on that place was that it was a tire factory, and that was the days of the white wall tires. And as you can see on that car right there, nah, that's a bad example. This car is a better example. Tire sidewalls are really thin now, but back in that time tire sidewalls were thick, and the reason for that is that the tires were considered a essential part of the ride of the vehicle. And so then what happened was that they had raised white walls, raised white letters, or they had white wall tires, and in order to do that they had to put a layer of white rubber in the sidewall of the tire and then grind off the part that was undesirable. And the net result of that is that there was a lot of dust, and it was rubber dust, which means it was flammable. And that, even that in and of itself wasn't terrible, but what happened was that the dust was collected in, most of it was collected in dust collectors, and that was then fed into a 55-gallon drum. And there were a lot of these all over the place where the grinding took place. And so you can know what happened during the summer. It got hot and it was dusty anyway, and it got into a situation of spontaneous combustion, especially since the material that was in the white wall tires was mineral and therefore staticky. So that was the deal was. So in the summer it was nothing for at least once or twice a week for there to be a spontaneous combustion fire in one of those exhausters. Now, of course, in this day and age, that would be totally unheard of, because OSHA would be all over it, and people have a lot more interest in not burning the place down, if you know what I mean. And so the end result was that it's likely that even in that same place, things being what they are, it would be better now than it was at the time. Ultimately, at some point in the day, the reason there were fires is because it was tolerated, with the exception of one. One of them happened in a place where it wasn't tolerated, and there's another story behind that which I might tell you later. But the reality is that the situation was tolerated by management, in that since nothing terrible happened, it was contained relatively easily. No one had to evacuate really. It got to be a routine part of the day to have something catch fire, which, if you think about it, like I said, is terrible. It would never happen today because people are just more sensitive to danger than they were in those days. And the tolerance of danger, and the tolerance of screwed up quality, and the tolerance of screwed up anything, including customer service or any of those other things, happens because it's tolerated. People know that it exists, and they don't do anything about it for one reason or another. And in my two books that I've written, Why People Don't Do Their Jobs and Why People Still Don't Do Their Jobs, this comes down to the essence of entrenched mediocrity. Nothing terrible happened, therefore the situation was allowed to continue. Therefore the cost of making the change wasn't offset by the emotional energy that was expended by the fire, and so the dangerous situation was allowed to continue despite the fact that it being obvious danger. And I think that happens a lot in business, and the same thing happens with respect to quality. which is everybody knows there's a situation such as some worn out piece of equipment, such as some person on the line is not capable of doing his or her job, and they allow it to continue. And that's the story. Stuff like that happens because it's tolerated. Anyway, it's about push-up time. We're going to do push-ups here where it's a little bit drier. Step count's about 6,000.